Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the No Cap Space. Tyler, Andrew holding it down for you again here on the YouTube with some breaking news out of women's basketball that really changes the landscape of the national title picture pretty heavily, honestly. We had talked about this on Sunday with the injury to Ashlyn Watkins for South Carolina. And at that time, we knew it was non-contact. We knew that she didn't go directly to the hospital and receive treatment in the building. And that was about it. And today we found out via ESPN that it is a torn ACL for Ashlyn Watkins, and she will be out for the rest of the season. We wanted to bring you our knee-jerk reactions. Obviously, first off, like, we don't ever want to see anyone get hurt. This sucks. Is the very, very first thing to say off the top, and well wishes on the recovery. But obviously, from a basketball on-court standpoint, this is massive for what it does for South Carolina, and again, the national title picture as a whole. Andrew, I'll kind of just lob it up to you to take it where your head is at right now as we learn this news, we learn the severity of it, and the fact that Ashlyn Watkins will be out for the season.
I mean, field's open now. I mean, as if it wasn't before, it's wide open now. Corey Close, this is your moment. The only thing standing in the way of a championship for Corey Close is Corey Close. I felt, and I still feel, that UCLA is the odds-on favorite to win the NCAA tournament this year. The only team that I thought would reasonably stand in their way would be a South Carolina team that they kind of jumped on early at Pauley Pavilion and on a neutral floor in April when Dawn Staley is at peak of her powers.
Yep.
There's obviously a degree of confidence that can be shaken in something like that. Boy, that's different now.
For sure.
And that's not to say like Dawn Staley forgot how to coach. It's just everything about this defense revolved around having Ashlyn Watkins in the lineup. You still have a Joyce Edwards. You still have a Chloe Kitts. You still have a Miriam Dowda. There was only one Ashlyn Watkins on this team. I mean, everything about it, and I'll go through some lower end statistics here. I mean, last year, the defensive win shares are 3.0. The block percentage, which is a percentage of opponent field goals that are blocked when you're on the floor. When she's on the floor, 10.7 last year, 9.6 this year. That means 1 in every 10 shots effectively are blocked when she's on the floor.
That's insane.
That's
a crazy number here. Yeah,
it is. Yeah. It's a crazy number. Like, her defensive rating when she's on the floor, it's never been above 70 in her career. You look at her actual on-score box statistics this year, 1.9 blocks per game this season. That leads South Carolina, 6.1 rebounds on the floor. That's second among players behind Chloe Kitts. I mean, and it was either you or Greer that had mentioned it on the Rap Show on Sunday. The closeout is what makes her different. The closeout is what allows her to be such an elite piece of what they do defensively, because she can get out on the perimeter and is so long that even if you have that shooting four, it doesn't matter because she'll run out there with you. And they have always had, South Carolina has always had on their best teams a paint equalizer, one who you are scared shitless to go into the circle with. And whether that's Camilla or Aaliyah Boston or Asia Wilson, they've kind of had one in steady rotation for the better part of 8 years now. This is the first year they don't really have that now. Now that Ashlyn Watkins is out, it was her. Now you have to build a Joyce Edwards into being that kind of player. Now you have to build Miriam Dowda into being that kind of player. Chloe Kitts, I don't think is ever going to be that kind of player. Chloe Kitts is not a traditional 5. She's a stretch 4 that is, a long, lanky, can shoot at 3 levels type of player, but she's not a defensive stopper the way South Carolina has traditionally had a defensive stopper. You need Sanaya Fagan here. You need Adele Tack this year. You need Sakima Walker. And the 3 players that I just mentioned of Dowda, Tack, and Walker, they combine for 14 total minutes a game.
Right.
There is no one really.
There's no plug and play here directly.
Correct.
Yeah.
Dawn distributes the minutes, pretty effectively. It's a 15-player rotation where I'd say they go about 11 deep. There's 11 players on the roster that have played over 200 minutes total this year. Dog, it's Joyce Edwards' world now.
It is 100%.
And I'll be honest, that's a lot to put on a freshman, especially on the defensive end. That's a lot to put on a freshman to basically say you have to be the anchor of our defense from start to finish, all the way to winning a national championship. So, I said it. I believe it was on the Sunday show in the immediate aftermath of the injury. Your ceiling is still Final Four, and that's okay. It's Dawn Staley. Like, what? She's going to get bounced out in the Sweet 16 here? That hasn't happened since 2019. Like, it's a different team and a different program and a different floor with the amount of players that they have. But I'll tell you this, man, Kim Mulkey's got to be licking chops at this.
Well, I'm looking at the SEC schedule that's coming up for South Carolina, and I think the whole SEC is realistically because the next games for them, it's A&M, so you get kind of a quote unquote tune-up game, but then you play Texas, who's number 5, at number 18 Alabama, you host number 10 Oklahoma, you host number 6 LSU, and then you go play at Tennessee. That is their slate of SEC games coming up, and so you're going to have to try and figure this out ASAP. Like, there's no, like, you don't, like, obviously you can't time injuries, but if this happened a month ago, you're looking at a whole different slate of games to try and figure this out a little bit compared to it happening now. And so just in that sense, like, we were talking a little bit about it before we clicked record, like, I know we mentioned this on Sunday as well, but like, there is no plug and play. There is no, like, when Camilla leaves for Brazil last year, you have Ashlyn Watkins there to plug and play.
Precisely.
There is no, that isn't here. That isn't the case for this. And so I think, truthfully, and obviously not, by no means am I trying to take away anything from Dawn's past coaching accomplishments. But I'm gonna tell you right now, if this feels like the rebuild year now, like in the way of, like, without having that post player, and obviously these are all very knee-jerk reactions, and we'll have to see how they play against Texas, especially this weekend. But like, this changes the entire makeup and way that South Carolina plays, which has already been changing this year, but especially on the defensive side of the ball, which I remember at that TCU game where we had boots on the ground, like, that's where I was like, okay, well, even if the offense looks different, which it does, and it's more perimeter based, the defense is still the defense because of what Ashlyn Watkins can do when it comes to erasing mistakes on the defensive end and just causing so much just destruction on the defensive side of the ball. You lose that now, and that you lose your foundation essentially for this South Carolina team and your comfortability to rely on something for this South Carolina team. So immediately thrown into the fire and the gauntlet of SEC conference play in the midst of trying to figure out who is going to be next. And there's certainly talent there, but there is no one-to-one replacement like we've seen in the past, where there's been this kind of cycle of just dominant post defenders in South Carolina jerseys. You just don't have that to replace Ashlyn Watkins on this roster. Not
only that, the effectiveness of what she did, even last year, right? Like, 3rd in PER in the SEC last year behind Camilla Cardoso and Angel Reese. Led the NCAA in defensive rating last year.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Block percentage led the SEC, mind you. Led in blocks as well. 3rd in offensive rebound percentage.
Massive, yeah.
In the SEC.
Great point.
And that, if you go back and you watch where South Carolina wins in the NCAA tournament, it's on the offensive boards.
Yeah.
Where they beat Iowa in the national title last year, all on the offensive boards. It was missing shots, and Camilla and Ashlyn Watkins cleaning it up. And even in prior seasons, where they get to a Final Four or where they get to a national championship game, the only time they're ever undone is a team that can keep them off the offensive glass. Stanford being the notable one there in the last 5 years. And man, I got to go back and look at the team statistics in terms of offensive rebounding, but boy, there's not really many that can do it the way Ashlyn Watkins does it in that respect.
Yeah.
And to me, that is also like a major component of this is you are losing what she's giving you, not just on the offensive end, on the defensive end, but the offensive end. And that just, nothing about that can be underestimated, you know?
Yeah.
The crazy thing is, and you kind of alluded to it already, the way we talked about last year's South Carolina team coming into the year is kind of how I'm looking at this one now. Where there's supposed to be like a bridging of the gap year. And honestly, I don't know why we did that. And
yeah, looking back on it,
like, know why, like, just as an aside, like, coaches do this shit. And like, this is the Kirby Smart, like, you got to create bulletin board material for your team. But like, nobody in the program actually felt that way. Like, we had Tahina Paopao on, and it was like, when did you know this team was it? She was like, literally the first game when we buried Notre Dame, and everyone was, you know. But like, Dawn kind of planted that seed of like, oh, it's a rebuild year last year. But like, when you look at it on paper, Camilla was coming back. And like, a ton of their talent was coming back, and you're getting players like Ashlyn Watkins in, and Tahina transfers in, and Malaysia comes in. This is not that. There is not the one returning elite front court option you had, to your point, was Ashlyn. And last year when Camilla came back, you had Ashlyn behind her. There is no second here, at least not for my money. And maybe that is something that reveals itself. And like you said, it better reveal itself quick, because they have a 5-game slate in January. That's literally the entirety of the SEC's top 25 muscle. It's Texas, Bama, Oklahoma, LSU, Tennessee. That's 5, 18, 10, 6, 16.
Insane.
I mean, that's a gauntlet. That would be a gauntlet even with Ashlyn Watkins in the lineup. You know, I would say you could reasonably go 5-0 in that slate. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen now. And not to say that, and you know, I know, I'm sure there's like some commentary in here that's like, you're negging them. No. Like, don't get it twisted. Like, they're still going to go to the Final Four. Like, they still might.
No, this is truly like the spoil of riches. Like, that this is like the standard of South Carolina is to be kind of the clear-cut national championship favorites, and they're just not this year with this. Like, we're not used to having question marks around South Carolina, and we had those
not in the last 4 years.
Exactly. That's you know. So like, we've had those, and then they got relatively solved, I feel like. You know, after the UCLA game, you had the big blowout at TCU. You're feeling good after that. The defense looks really, really solid. And then now we're back to kind of where we started the season before Ashlyn was kind of like in the rotation and everything, of like, okay, who's going to be the one to step up? And now we're back to kind of not square one, but kind of in that way. So, I mean, immediately to your point, like, Joyce Edwards is just thrusted into this responsibility. And I don't think, from a talent perspective, I don't think that she's not ready for it in that way or anything. I think she's going to be phenomenal, frankly. But from a defensive perspective, like the point you made earlier, you don't just put someone in for Ashlyn Watkins. Not on this roster. Like it's very rare to have Camilla and Ashlyn on the same team where you can plug and play. That's not normal. This is the normality of it, where you really have one player like that. And now South Carolina is obviously down that archetypal player, and they just don't have that immediate replacement like they had in years past.
It's gonna have to be Chloe Kitts and Joyce. I mean, and statistically, so far what we've seen is like they've been good on the offensive side. Chloe is leading the team with 2.9 offensive rebounds. Joyce is at 2.4. Ashlyn Watkins at 2.3. Sanaya Fagan kind of sits behind, and that to me is like the person who I think is going to have to step up into that role. But here's the problem here. When you look at the two leading foulers per game for South Carolina, it's Sanaya Fagan and Joyce Edwards at 2.1 and 1.7. The secret is here. Like, the scout and the scheme is here. There is an inefficiency in where they are positionally, and all you got to do is get the bigs in foul trouble, and there's trouble for South Carolina in game. And for the amount of bigs that we have in the Southeastern Conference this year, as you mentioned, you're talking about a Texas team where I was extremely impressed with Taylor Jones and how she conducted herself.
Yes,
And
Aaliyah Moore has been really, really good this season as well. I've liked a
Taylor Jones has been great, but also like Kayla Oldacker, right? Like that's 6'6" big body forward. Madison Booker, doing Madison Booker things, and even though she's kind of more in that Kits mold, Aaliyah Moore, as you mentioned, that's before we even get to someone like Reagan Beers, right? Like that's before we end up getting to Alabama, who like underratedly, Essence Cody has had a really nice season so far, and Zay Green is putting teams in the friggin' torture chamber for everything she does. LSU is big as big can be. That is a group that's got a 6'5" Jersey Wolfenbarger who plays like every other Blankenbarger. I don't know what it is about
there's
that.
So many.
Isn't that weird? It's like the Phineas and Ferb, like it's true, but it's weird that it's happened twice. Where you've got Taylor Poffenbarger and Jersey Wolfenbarger, and both are like 6'3".
I've definitely gotten them confused on many occasions. I'm not gonna, like 100%. Yeah,
it's very strange. But like Samaya Smith is kind of in that Kim Mulkey build of like a big bodied center.
Yeah.
The one team that I think you're going to get it over on fine is going to be Tennessee, but Tennessee's got some good guards. That's a situation where.
That's where the perimeter defense
rebounding is going to come into play.
Yeah.
And you will crush Tennessee if you're good on the boards, but you just lost one of your most effective rebounding options. So, I think that the ceiling for this South Carolina team diminishes ever so slightly. Like we go from an A+ to an A, but that half measure is the difference between winning a national title and not winning a national title. It's the difference between going to the Final Four and taking on a team like Iowa and having Raven Johnson not be ready for the defensive moment, or not having enough 3-point shooters to counter Iowa, and they exploit the inefficiency and you lose that game. Dawn retools, comes back, gets a lot more perimeter shooters, and then proceeds to vaporize the entire college basketball world and move to an undefeated national title. Like, this is the exact situation where game of inches kind of applies in this scenario. And that's a big inch. Or arguably your defensive centerpiece. And the person that I think personally, and this is my last piece, you can't underestimate the mental component of how much Ashlyn Watkins scared people inside. The blocking is so prolific. And I do think there is something mental about a particularly prolific shot blocker that gets you in a place and position where you're like, I don't want to go in there because I don't want my shit on SportsCenter. I don't want my shit going viral on TikTok because Ashlyn Watkins swatted my shot into the fifth row. Like, kids don't want that. Like, it's a cold world in these social media streets, right? So I think that matters, because once you have the confidence of players to say, no, I can go in there. Like, I can go in there. I can hit this three because the closeout doesn't scare me as much anymore. South Carolina has players that can scare you defensively. Ashlyn Watkins inspired fear defensively, the way Aaliyah Boston or Camila Cardozo or Asia Wilson inspired fear. And to me, I think that's the key and the secret sauce to a lot of South Carolina's national title success has been somebody in there that you fear. And we have to find out now who is going to be feared. And is there someone on this roster that inspires that fear? I don't see it now. Maybe we'll see it in March.
Yeah. I mean, look, again, this gauntlet is going to go crazy. Again, they play A&M to start. That'll be on Thursday. So we'll get a little bit of a look there. But once that 5-game gauntlet hits, it is I mean, look, we're going to find out quick, frankly, a lot. And again, this isn't saying that South Carolina isn't going to win the national championship. This isn't saying they're not going to make the Final Four. This is simply saying this hurts. and this hurts a lot. And
I will,
go ahead.
Can I add and give you the shout for what you said in the pre-show? Dawn wins this Natty this year. This might be her most impressive one.
Man, even with the undefeated, like this, like the hallmark of a Dawn Staley national championship team is the dominant big inside. If she's able to coach a team to a national championship and work around losing that dominant big inside, this might be her most impressive title win. Not even taking away anything else from obviously those other incredible seasons, but the mark that this would be major. So
this
again,
because what comes next, just to your point, this is a coaching job.
Yep.
What happens now is a coaching and development job. And Matt, that separates, that's what separates Don Staley from other coaches. And that's what we're about to find out. Like, you're already, for my money, like she's already in like the Geno Paddish type of tier.
For sure. Agreed.
Bro, you win a natty with your defensive centerpiece going down like that. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Like you're pushing legacy up into a different stratosphere even than those two, because of where you are at this point in your career and how many years you still have to go. So I'm right with you. She holds a trophy in April, bro. We're talking some serious Don Staley legacy shit when all is said and done.
Yeah. Again, well, now it's just time to wait and see. Again, obviously we hate injuries like this. So best wishes on the recovery to Ashlyn Watkins. And I mean, we'll be there to find out how this goes down and hear from it. Shawnee will be boots on the ground on Sunday. Yes, Sunday for the South Carolina-Texas game, and then we will be live directly after for our post-game thoughts. So look, we'll have some dialogue pretty quickly, honestly, coming up about what this South Carolina team looks like and what maybe little shifts that we see in response to this injury with Ashlyn Watkins out for the season. But yeah, we will see you guys then on Sunday. We'll also have lives on Wednesday and Thursday with previews dropping for USC in Maryland and LSU in Tennessee. Some big games this week all across the country, and we at No Cap Space got you covered for it all. So make sure you're subscribed here on the YouTube. You're subscribed on NoCapSpaceWBB.com. You can find all of that in the description below, and we'll see you next time.